All right, folks, it's time for another edition of the Online Dinner Party where we bring in exciting guests and talk about different things going on in the world. And I'm very interested in the guests I've got today since they are involved in the space of history, which y'all know I am involved in and interested in as well. As one of the historians for the Hayti Heritage Center, which is a cultural arts center in Durham, North Carolina. We've had the pleasure of having people like Melissa Harris Perry, and actually we've got Britt Bennett that'll be coming up very shortly, and of course Taisha Coates will be coming up as well. So there have been some great guests, and there's others that'll be coming up at that cultural arts center that I work at. And I think today they were starting a video program with a good friend of mine, Jatovia McDuffie. It's the opening day of a video camp that they're starting, and I think it'll be 2 days of the month. So the 10th, the first date is today, and then the next one I think is on the 17th or the 24th. I'm trying to remember which date it's on, and all along those lines. But I had the pleasure yesterday of actually working with the Whistle Stop Tour, which is actually working with Legal Defense Fund, and they were having a group of about 200 people come to town and learn about Pauli Murray and learn about the lot of the Black Wall Street history that exists and everything like that. Because, like I said, I'm one of the staff historians at the Hayti Heritage Center, which is a Black cultural arts center in Durham, North Carolina, and all along those lines. So we gave them a tour of Hayti, and we talked about some of the founders of Black Wall Street here in Durham, North Carolina. And of course, we also had some people that were going on a separate exhibit, because I think they had 4 buses and about 5 tours altogether, and all along those lines. And I know that in talking to one of the people that was organizing it, they were coming from various places, including DC. I believe that Atlanta might have been there, and even some from New York. So I think most of them were from the East Coast, because I don't remember anybody being from the West Coast and all along those lines. But they definitely enjoyed us teaching them about the history of Black Wall Street, Haiti's role and connection to the country of Haiti, and a number of other things that we were talking about, including the secret game between North Carolina Central and Duke that involved the Duke medical professionals and everything like that. And I'm glad to say that Central, which is an HBCU, actually won that game, and all along those lines. So we talked about that. And we also talked about a number of other interesting facts that are part of the Whistle Stop Tour that I and Telly do on a regular basis. As a matter of fact, we're called conductors, and we're leading the conversation and all along those lines. And the other thing that I can tell you is that a lot of people are paying attention to sports, whether it's the World Cup, which I believe is starting on tomorrow, and all along those lines. And of course, people are paying attention to the sports world, where the Carolina Hurricanes, which is our team here, has now tied it up at 2-2, and the next game will be tomorrow. And then, of course, the Knicks will be playing a game in Madison Square Garden, and all along those lines. And they'll be going against San Antonio. And I know San Antonio will be trying to tie up the series as well. I don't think that the current president is planning to make a trip this time around, even though he did make a trip last time and everything like that. So I'm going to bring in my guest for the day and everything like that, because I'm definitely looking forward to hearing her thoughts around Martyr Day and all along those lines, and learn more about this celebration and what people can do with the celebration and everything like that, because definitely it is something that I know a lot of people will be interested in learning more about and everything like that, because I'm a big fan and have actually participated in some theater productions where they talked about Frederick Douglass and the whole notion of him asking, what does the 4th of July mean to a person of African American or minority descent and everything like that. But I'm going to bring in my guest and going to learn more about what she's got going on. So I'll bring in Gloria Brown Marshall, an award-winning writer, playwright, and social justice attorney. She could have been in that group and everything that I was talking about with the legal fund and everything like that. And who knows, she might even be trying to bring some of her works to the National Black Theater Festival, which I go to regularly. And now I think it's called the International Black Theater Festival in Winston-Salem, and all in that space, because they've definitely had some great works that have even dealt with social justice, whether it's plays that have been about Emmett Till, or whether it's been other plays that have dealt with parts of our history and all along those lines. But when Lisa got in touch with me and told me about this fascinating project that you've got on your radar and everything like that, I was like, I've got to get this woman on my show, because she sounds like she's got some fascinating things going on, and I need to learn more about them, because I see that Martyrs Day is going to fall on July 5th, the day after July 4th, and it's going to align with Frederick Douglass's 1852 speech, which I alluded to earlier. What to the slave is the 4th of July, and you'll be honoring the works of others who gave their lives for the cause. And I'd love to hear more about your thoughts and how you got involved in this project and everything like that.
you. Thank you for having me.
No, no problem. So tell me more about this project and how you got involved. I'm definitely very fascinated by it when I learned about it, and I'm going like, this is definitely something that I'd be interested in. And have there been other plays about social justice that you've been involved with? Because I know that I'm good friends with Mike Wiley, and he's done a number of plays, everything from Boxcar to who I alluded to earlier, Emmett Till, to a number of other folks. So there are a lot of people in the theater world that are definitely very much interested in us learning about our history, particularly our history in the African American community.
Well, I am someone who has a background in theater all the way
Uh-huh.
back before I went to law school. And even after I was in law school and the whole time I've been practicing law or teaching law, I've always been seeing myself as a playwright. So I continue to write plays. I have one I'm working on right now that's focused on class and these class wars that are taking place between the African people of African descent and the white working class community. And that play is titled Class. I'm looking for a theater right now. And I've been to the National Black Theater Festival. I actually have had excerpts of my plays at the National Black Theater Festival. It's been a minute, but yeah, I've been down there. Um, but Martyrs Day actually was born out of my book tour for my
Hmm.
recent book, A Protest History of the United States. So, A Protest History of the United States is a book that covers, or not covers, but it's a journey through 500 years of protests, different protesters, different types of resistance. It starts with indigenous protests and resistance, goes to slave uprisings as protests. I expand the idea of protest to include a lot of different things beyond the protests in the street with the signs. So, A Protest History of the United States was the book that put me on a 15-month, 25 state book tour. So I went to all these different places, would love to go to North Carolina. So, and you tell me, I'll be down there. So I would love to do something down there with my book, A Protest History of the United States. But it was during that book tour that I had a chance to do something that the politicians rarely do anymore, but I did, which was to sit with the people
Hmm.
and hear what the people had to say. And so, whether or not it was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, or in Houston, Texas, or whether or not it was in Sarasota, Florida, New Jersey, Connecticut, Cambridge, Massachusetts, at Harvard Bookstore, these different places, I was listening to what they were saying, and they would always ask these questions: What can we do? What did we learn from the people who protested before?
Right.
And I'm afraid to protest because of the violence. And so whether or not protest is still effective became this major issue. I believe it is effective. I believe it requires strategy. And for people to think that the time investment is more than protest on Friday to have a result on Monday. But what came out of this was I kept asking myself, because I was asking them, can you do more?
Right.
Can you do more than the No Kings protest? Can you do more? Can you ask yourself, what else can I do? What can I do in this moment? That was how I would leave the audiences. You ask this computer brain of yours, because we invented the cell phone. The cell phone didn't invent us, not yet anyway. And so I would ask them that. Then I asked myself, what else can I do? And I kept thinking of the people, because there's always been violent pushback against protesters, even though we're in the 250th anniversary and the Declaration of Independence is a protest document. But
Right.
there's still in this country this idea that some people deserve the right to free speech and protest and other people don't. And so the people who don't sometimes get injured, sometimes get jailed, and unfortunately sometimes lose their lives, like Heather Heyer, who was protesting in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Right.
When I was in Charlottesville, Virginia, I was like, oh my goodness, what else can I do? I was in Mississippi, in Natchez, speaking as a keynote speaker at their book festival. And I was like, what else can I do? And it was there that I pronounced, we're going to have Martyrs Day. I just, out of thin air, I said, there's got to be people who died in protesting, or they died like George Floyd, and from their death came changes in social justice. We've got to acknowledge them, because in this country, people are slain, and it's just like another day. People go on like nothing happened.
Right.
when Renee Good died early this year, and people act like nothing happened. So Martyrs Day was born during my book tour for Protest History of the United States. And I asked myself what else I can do. Because if I'm asking that of other people, I'm asking of myself too. And I said, well, I can found this day. So I am the founder of Martyrs Day. And I can gather other people around who have an interest in this. And I found out there are so many, because those people, whether or not it's Emmett Till or Viola Liuzzo or Medgar Evers, people are still wounded by what happened. And we don't do anything to help heal the wounds, and we don't pay tribute to the people who died for voting rights. We have voting rights martyrs like Vernon Dahmer in Mississippi, who was burned alive because he was paying the poll tax as a black farmer for himself. He was a well-to-do farmer paying it for other farmers. They came and burned him in his own house. So when we start thinking about the people who have been martyred on behalf of social justice, whether or not it can start with Crispus Attucks and go all the way forward, we need to recognize they are regular people. They didn't sign up for war. So this doesn't fall within Memorial Day. It doesn't fall within Veterans Day, D-Day. They didn't sign up for war. They're regular people going out to the store to get bread and milk just like us. And they decided they were going to protest like Heather Heyer did, and then have a white supremacist run a car into the protests in Charlottesville, Virginia. Like Renee Good, who was gunned down in her own car. These are regular people who decided to protest. They were activists. John Brown, who stood up against slavery and decided to do something about it, who was hanged because of his uprising around Harper's Ferry. I wanted to make sure, one, when we say to young people, oh, do you know people died to get your voting rights? We need to have a face and a name to those people. And so when you go to my website, martyrsday.us, and the reason why it's martyrsday.us, not martyrsday.com, not martyrsday.org, martyrsday.us, because this is the first U.S. Martyrs Day. Think about it. We don't have any day that actually pays tribute to these people who lost their lives for civil rights, for social justice. We have Martin Luther King's Day. Okay, but I thought, how many more people were there? There are hundreds, and I'm afraid there are thousands of people who have lost their lives in this country.
No, they're probably worth 1,000. And you mentioned the fact, because this is the 250th anniversary of America. And actually, we had a guest on our news show earlier today. They were talking about the Declaration of Independence, because he wrote a book called Tyrants and Rogues and everything like that. But I was just wondering, because you said that you're covering 500 years, including the indigenous people and everything like that. And I primarily identify with the African-American side of my ancestry and everything like that. But I do have some relatives that are more in tune with the native side of their ancestry, and they identify more with that and everything like that, because I have some relatives that are very much in the powwow circuit and all in that space, and even one cousin that has a company that does designs of beads and other native jewelry and other things along those lines. So native attire, that'd be my cousin Will Hedgepeth and his sister Verna Hedgepeth, or Verna because she's married now. So Verna Street and everything has been married for decades and everything like that. But they're very much involved in that powwow circuit. But you're going all the way back to 500 years. So I'm assuming that you're also including the martyrs that were here. They were the original people and everything like that, because there were people here before the colonists landed and everything like that. So who are some of these people that you're talking about that are even further back in our history?
Well, what we decided to do for Martyrs Day, we decided to have this is our first Martyrs Day. This is the very first one. So we have an inaugural committee, and we meet constantly. I was on the phone with members of the committee for about 5 hours earlier today, as we put things together for Martyrs Day on July 5th. There are host committees for local Martyr Day event, because that's the vision I have. And I always like to use the phrase from vision to victory. So the vision I had of Martyrs Day, that there would be a national Martyrs Day, but people locally know who your martyrs are. I couldn't know that. And so you know who your local martyrs are. And so people, Philadelphia, for example, just had their city pass a proclamation declaring July 5th as Martyrs Day. And they have 5 people. Octavius Cato is the major name that people might remember. In 1870, the 15th Amendment was passed, giving Black men the right to vote. In 1871, there was an attack on Black people when it was time to vote, and 5 men were killed because the 15th Amendment only gave men the right to vote, Black men the right to vote. 5 Black men were slaughtered by white mobs in Philadelphia. You think of this thing happening other places? No, this is in Philadelphia, that these 5 Black men were slaughtered because they were attempting to vote when they had the right to vote, because it was understood how powerful the Black vote was even back then, because the Black vote changes the outcome of elections. And that's why they're, doing what they're doing to the Voting Rights Act now, and the Supreme Court and others around the country are undermining the Black vote, because our vote is powerful. We have that political power, and it's being taken away from us all the time because they don't want us to use it. The same was true in 1871. And so that local martyrs committee decided that they would focus on 1871 and those Black men who were slaughtered trying to vote. And so their voting martyrs are those 5 men, and their proclamation is focused on that. But I just thought that was amazing that we have our first proclamation. It would come from Philadelphia, but we have a list of about 25 people who symbolically represent the 2026 cohort of national martyrs, and Crazy Horse is among them. Okay. And when we think about what happened with Crazy Horse, who was indigenous, who was a fierce warrior, who battled to protect his people, protect the land that they were on, and was lured into a fort with being told that he was going to be negotiating peace, and was murdered, basically. And so he's one of our martyrs. We want to make sure Pittsburgh, for example, is another Martyrs Day local event. Theirs is online, where Philadelphia is in person. And these are all on the website, martyrsday.us, martyrsday.us. And so the Pittsburgh group is working with the indigenous and allies. So they're working with them. And so their program is going to have a combination of the indigenous and the allies as part of their program, where they're going to be talking about African Americans as well as others, but they begin heavily to recognize the indigenous martyrs and how the role of the indigenous as I recognize them as the original protesters. Right. And they're also being recognized as some of the original martyrs. And so when we talk about the country, we're not just talking about from 1776 going forward. My book doesn't do that, and Martyrs Day doesn't do that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know that one of the martyrs that you may be touching on that's from Durham, North Carolina, and all along those lines, because I know somebody that has definitely done a lot of writing around him and everything like that. So I'm assuming that Booker T. Spicely would be able to be included in that history and all along those lines, because he was definitely involved in some of the protests and was a soldier and all along those lines and everything like that. I think he was in the 50s, if I'm remembering my history correctly, and everything like that. But definitely, I'm thinking that some of these people that we might not have in our known history would be added and everything like that. So I'm not familiar if you're that familiar with the case of Booker T. Spicely, but I know that he would probably be considered a martyr, and there was a big trial that was involving him and everything like that involved here in Durham, North Carolina.
Well, what I want people to do, because I've spent 30 years of my life studying, researching protest history of the United States, is my 7th book. And so I like legal history, and I work on these things, but I can't know all these people. And that's why I said we have to look at our local martyrs. People can send information to me at info@martyrsday.us. And if they have people, they say, we want to have these people on a national level. These people need to be known nationally. Not only do we want to have a local Martyrs Day program, and that Martyrs Day program could take any type of form, but we also want this person to receive national attention. So after this cohort of martyrs that we have on our website, martyrsday.us, you go to the website and see the list of martyrs, and they each have a short bio, and ranging from Crispus Attucks all the way up to Renee Good. And so it's a very diverse group, but I told you Crazy Horse is included, as well as two laborers who had been gunned down in 1934 on July 5th of all dates, as they were protesting for higher wages in San Francisco. So we have a San Francisco local Martyrs Day that they're going to be doing something locally on July 5th in San Francisco. We have Hyattsville, Maryland. They're going to be doing something in Hyattsville, Maryland as a local Martyrs Day committee. So Lewis, Delaware is having a program. They're going to be showing the film Till in Lewis, Delaware on July 5th and having a discussion afterwards with an author who's written a book on Till. I actually have a play on Till as well. But there are also the churches. And because this is a Sunday, so I'm asking the churches that you could have a reading of the names of the people on the website. You could have a moment of prayer. We have some churches that afterwards in their fellowship hall, because our program at 2 p.m. Eastern and New York City is going to be live streamed. So people can come to our live stream and watch our live stream program at 2 p.m. Eastern. But go on the website, martyrsday.us, to get the information, and RSVP to get the link for the live stream. But we have churches that are going to have a moment of silence. We have ministers who are going to incorporate Martyrs Day into their Sunday sermons on July 5th. So there are many ways in which the church can get involved in other religious institutions as well. And
everything like that. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, I just wanted to go to our website and state this. While celebrating this nation's 250th anniversary, remember the slain activists in protests of any era in U.S. history, and those slain in America whose untimely deaths led to positive changes in this nation, as well as those who made extraordinary sacrifices for equal justice throughout their lifetime. They are American martyrs. So I want us, other countries have a Martyrs Day. So I wanted America to have a Martyrs Day based on American martyrs, and that's what this is about.
Oh, what are some of the other countries that have a Martyrs Day? And by the way, just to let you know more about Booker Spice Lee, and he would fit in on the day and everything because he was born December 1st, 1909, and died July 8th, 1944. So it was actually 44, and he was a victim of racial violence, and his murder in North Carolina, United States, is considered to be one of a series of outrages that contributed to the rise in activism in the civil rights movement and everything like that. So they say other incidents in this period included Irene Morgan in July 1944 being arrested and jailed in Virginia for refusing to give up her seat on an interstate bus to a white person. So it wasn't just Rosa Parks, it was others as well. But I do know that he had just come back from serving. I believe that would have been World War II and everything like that. And it was definitely a case of a big case where a white gentleman had basically killed him as he was involved in that incident. So, and they even in some of the newspaper headlines.
Yes, would you please, info at martyrsday.us, because I was writing it down myself. But yes, that sounds excellent. And that's how we've actually gathered many of these names. People have actually said to us, did you know about what happened in our community in this date? Because they're not going away. Our ancestors are not going to let us have these people slaughtered and then forgotten about. That's the other part of it. I believe that the ancestral call, that this is a spiritual mission, that we have to remember the people who were slaughtered and not play this amnesia game that this country wants to play. And even the game that's being played now, erase people's names and pretend like things didn't happen. We can't fall for that okie doke. We have to actually stand up for those people whose lives were taken in order for social justice to go forward. The work of freedom is unfinished.
Right.
The work of freedom is unfinished, and it's up to us to do more in this work. And the least we can do is acknowledge the fact that these people existed. Can we do that?
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Can we acknowledge they existed?
We definitely have to do that, have to acknowledge they existed and everything like that. And I'll definitely get you the information on Booker T. Spice. And there might be some other ones that were involved, both in recent history as well as past history and everything like that. Now, there's another holiday.
We're actually looking at the Wilmington and what happened in Wilmington. So that's already been on discussion for the future. So yeah, so we're looking at 2027 and what we're going to look at in 2027. I've traveled to Greenwood. I was in Tulsa as part of a program. So we've looked at that. I mean, we're not gonna let them bury our dead and pretend like they didn't exist. So
No,
I'm sorry, you go ahead.
definitely cannot do that and everything like that. Now, you brought up a couple of things. One is there's another holiday that is already out there. So, how should people connect Martyrs Day to Juneteenth? Because Juneteenth will be taking place. Some people are doing celebrations this coming weekend and everything like that, or definitely by next weekend, and all along those lines. So, how should people tie these two holidays together, or do you see the connection between the two holidays?
Well, Juneteenth, and I actually give talks on Juneteenth, but Juneteenth is connected to the Civil War
Right.
and connected, and there could be martyrs that come out of the Civil War that could be part of Martyrs Day. But that was about freedom, the
Mhm.
Emancipation Proclamation that gave equality, absolute equality. People don't even know this, that the Emancipation Proclamation actually in the order number 3 gave absolute equality to people who had been enslaved. That phrase, absolute equality, is in the order. The order disappeared for over 100 years. It was found by the National Archives about 8 to 10 years ago. And absolute equality is in there. That's why it disappeared, because somebody probably hid it, because they didn't want us to know that we had been given absolute equality by Abraham Lincoln in the 1860s. And we've been fighting for this equality ever since. We had it already under law back in the 1860s. But I think it's important for Juneteenth to also be a celebration of freedom, but freedom isn't free.
Right.
And that's what Martyrs Day is about. A price was paid for this freedom. And so as we celebrate and enjoy our barbecue for the 4th of July, take a time out for the 5th, as Frederick Douglass said, what to the slave was the 4th of July. And in this moment in particular, with so much undermining of African American rights and so much undermining of our democracy, we need to ask ourselves, what to American people who deserve a true democracy is the 4th of July? What to the American people who thought we had a democracy is the 250th anniversary celebration of the Declaration of Independence, a document most people haven't read anyway, because if they actually read the document, they would see it doesn't say what they think it does.
Right.
But nobody ever reads it. And as somebody who teaches constitutional law, they don't read the Constitution either. And so people, if they read these founding documents, they would have a better idea that this country was one that has been in conflict between commerce and freedom from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Commerce and freedom at loggerheads from the very beginning of this nation's history going forward. So when those two things do battle and the people rise up, the commerce-based aspect of this country is willing to do any type of violence to crush those who disagree. And unfortunately, a nation born in protest has undermined protest so often throughout this history to the point of violence and to the point of death. And so for those people who have been a part of protests, and I've been a part of protests since the 3rd grade, it's not just an academic thing for me.
Right.
So I've been in protests this year alone. I led protests last year. So I want people to understand they should engage in protests safely as they can, but also understand that this nation, you cannot be in a protest. As you just spoke about, you cannot be in a protest and this nation can come for you.
Yeah, that makes sense and everything like that. Another major holiday that has been taking place, I think that we're in the middle of it right now and everything like that. So I'm imagining that you're covering various martyrs, not just martyrs in our history, meaning African American history, but also martyrs, say, from the women's movement, because we do know that there were martyrs that were involved, like there in the New York area with some of the protests that actually created some of the gay activism and all along those lines and everything like that. I'm thinking about that village that got stoned, the name, and it's not coming to me right now.
Well, the Harvey Milk is also one of our martyrs on the website. So on the website, martyrsday.us, Harvey Milk was an openly gay politician, one of the first openly gay politicians in San Francisco, who was gunned down, by Dan White in San Francisco, gunned down. So we have Harvey Milk and Viola Liuzzo, who was in Selma, Alabama, outside of Montgomery, between Montgomery and Selma, going to the airport when the Ku Klux Klan shot into the car and killed her. and ran the car off the road. We have Reverend Reeb. Reverend Reeb, R-E-E-B, was a minister who came down from Cambridge. Remember, there were 3 marches over the Edmund Pettus Bridge. He was there for that second march. He was caught and beaten to death by Klansmen, white supremacists in Selma, Alabama, as they were waiting to go across the bridge. And so these are people, and he's a white gentleman. Viola Liuzzo is a white female. So those laborers I talked to you about from San Francisco, the 2 who were gunned down, those were white. But Jimmy Lee Jackson, the African American who was shot by, you know, police, law enforcement, will say, in Selma, is the reason why there was a march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in the first place. He was leading a peaceful protest, and he was chased and gunned down by law enforcement. And so that was the reason why they called Martin Luther King, they called others to the Edmund Pettus Bridge to march, was because of the killing of Jimmy Lee Jackson. That's a name people really don't know. They know John Lewis, but they don't know Jimmy Lee Jackson. And so we want to bring these names and many others to the forefront.
I'm imagining you're going to bring some of the more modern martyrs into the conversation as well, because I had the pleasure of hearing some of the people that had been killed in that horrific shooting in South Carolina that was at the church and all along those lines. So I imagine those people will be involved as well, because I know that some of the survivors actually came and spoke. This was probably before the pandemic and everything like that. So I'm thinking 2019 or 2018, but it was after that particular horrible shooting that they came and spoke, and I got a chance to hear some of those. So I'm imagining that they would be included in the list of martyrs as well.
Yep, and now you see how many people are involved. I look at this as something that goes well beyond my lifetime,
right,
that it would be taken up by other people as well, that this is the inaugural Martyrs Day. I say to people, you might not have been there when Kwanzaa started, even though Juneteenth became a federal holiday, but Juneteenth was in play in the 1800s. So we weren't there for the beginning of Juneteenth. You can be there for the beginning of Martyrs Day, because as many people who have been killed in this country for protesting, killed in this country for voting, we just have so many, as you pointed out, you know, white racism. That one of the martyrs, Lieutenant Richard Collins, a college student at Bowie State in HBCU, was on the campus of University of Maryland when he was stabbed to death by a white man. And it was found out later that this white young man had all of this racist material, anti-Semitic material on his website, on his phone, and everything. And so from the death of Richard Collins, who was a lieutenant, he was in the ROTC, he had just been commissioned and was going into the military when he was stabbed to death on the street, minding his own business, because a white male walked by and told him to step aside, and he didn't, so he was stabbed in the chest and died. That was in 2017. That wasn't in 1917. That wasn't in 1967. That was in 2017. He was a college student with everything ahead of him. And so from his death, they made changes at the University of Maryland. At University of Maryland, at Bowie State, but also at the state of Maryland passed legislation around hate crimes, because it's so difficult to prove a hate crime. You have to prove what's in somebody's head when they commit the crime. So when they found all this racist material on this person's laptop and phone, etc., they tried to prove it was a hate crime, but they couldn't connect, based on the law, that material with what he did. And so after Lieutenant Collins' death, there was social justice movement forward to make sure that the connection between these types of actions can be more clearly seen, as opposed to using did they intend to do this because they had racial animus when they actually committed the act. That's very difficult to prove what was in somebody's head when they committed the act, if that person not to confess to it or make a statement when they're doing it. I'm doing this because I hate Black people. If they don't do these things, then it's very difficult to prove. So that legislation that came out of Maryland is now being seen in other states as well, as ways to reinforce hate crime laws to protect people and actually get justice for those people who are killed that are hate crimes, but it's difficult to prove as a hate crime. So we have, of course, that came out of George Floyd's murder, was the Emmett Till
Right.
Anti-Lynching Act, but people have failed to apply it.
Right.
So they had, like, remember the mass shootings they had up in Buffalo, New York?
Mhm.
I made the argument there that that should have been under the Emmett Till anti-lynching law, but no one did it. So what's the use of having this law after fighting for 100 and so years to have an anti-lynching law and finally get one and not use it? When we're being lynched in ways that not people want the traditional tree and rope lynching, and that's probably happening all around as well, from what I've been reading. But in order to use this legislation, we're going to have to think out of the box, because people aren't going to follow all these certain regimens in order for the law to be applied. We need to think of what lynching means. That murder of Lieutenant Collins could have been classified as a lynching, depending on how people are looking at the argument could be made for that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you're talking about lynchings, and there have been modern day lynchings. As you were just saying that, I was remembering the incident that took place, I think it was about a decade or two ago, that took place in Jasper, Texas, and everything like that. So that was in
Yes.
modern times and everything. So he would definitely be considered a martyr and everything like that, because that was not in the 1920s. That was in more recent times that incident took place in Jasper, Texas, and everything like that.
Yes.
I imagine that would be
Yes.
a case of a martyr as well. Now, you mentioned that some of the churches might be reciting some of the names. What are some of the other ways that you are envisioning people honoring those martyrs and everything like that? Because sometimes, even with Dr. King, we hear some of his famous speeches and everything along those lines. Because actually, when we were doing the tour yesterday, my co-conductor, Johanna, she also goes by Joe Rose, was talking about the fact that Dr. King had actually been planning to be here in Durham on the time that he was assassinated, because he got called to Memphis where he was assassinated and everything like that. But he had originally planned to be here working with some of the workers in this area and everything along those lines. And I think he'd even written some of the speech here before getting called to the Memphis where he was assassinated and everything like that. So what are some of the ways that you see people actually bring in this conversation to the forefront?
I think we've had people doing spoken word. We've had people sing a song. We've had people who have, and these are in the churches. They could be after church. You could have the spoken word, but you also have people read the bios. If you just select 3 people and read the bios, because most people won't know these folks existed. So read the bios of those that we don't really know, that aren't as familiar as Dr. King and John Lewis and others. But read the bios of some of these people and realize what their contributions have been, and understand, especially for those young people and the voting rights martyrs.
Right.
If we could in church just give a prayer, say a prayer for the souls of some of these voting rights martyrs. Read their bios in church. Just pick 3 or 4 and just read their bios in church to remind people what we had to go through to get our voting rights in the first place, and what these people went through. I think that would be an amazing thing to do in church. And remember that Jesus was a protester.
Right.
And you think about it, Jesus was an activist.
Mhm.
So when you start thinking about what happened to him, you was like, so you see, he was a martyr. But you start also realizing that, the standing up and having a voice, we could do it, and most of us do it. Millions of people have gone out to protest. And
Right.
this year alone, millions of people have already gone out to protest in this year alone. And yet there are still incidents like Renee Good that happened this year in Minneapolis.
Right.
So protests overall, you try to be safe. You try to not be outside when it's dark. As soon as I tell people this all the time, you make sure that people know you go to the protest, who is leading your group. Leave your telephone number with people so they can get in touch with you. Have a telephone number on you that you can call somebody else, because nobody remembers telephone numbers anymore. And also the ACLU has a listing of things on their website for protesters to know. That's a really good list. But there's going to be in this country some aspects of violence, because that's what this country does, and that's what this country has always done. And so we have to be extra safe and make sure that when something does happen, we don't just forget it happened. We don't forget it. And that's something this country likes to do. It likes to forget quickly and move on. And the program that we're giving at Riverside Church on Sunday July 5th at 2 o'clock. The title is Martyrs, Memory, and Recommitment.
Oh, wow.
So the other thing the churches can do, yes, recommit to social justice. Recommit. Think to yourself, what can I do in this moment?
Yeah.
My sphere of influence. What can I do? I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, for example. I'm a member of the National Bar Association, the Black Bar Association. You know, what can lawyers do in this moment? What can AKAs, what can any of the Divine Nine do in this moment? What can we do? And once you start asking that question, especially of the churches, how can you help people recommit?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And sometimes I think that we oftentimes think about the more violent martyrs and everything like that. But I'm also thinking that probably some of the martyrs are also people that were martyred in other ways and everything like that, whether it was health issues or other ways that people can be killed without necessarily being killed the more traditional bullet and the traditional murders that we think about. So I was just wondering, when you think of martyrs, are we just strictly talking about people that have been murdered in the traditional ways, or are we thinking of martyrs in other ways as well? Because there have been a number of people that probably could be put as martyrs that were killed. I mean, it might be thinking about some of the diseases that happened with our native populations and everything like that, that they probably could be considered to be martyred because of some of the diseases that were introduced in those communities and everything like that. So I'm just thinking, when we're thinking about martyrs, are we also thinking about the ways that people are not traditionally martyred, for lack of a better term?
Well, we also have in our definition those who made extraordinary sacrifices for equal justice throughout their lifetimes.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, Fannie Lou Hamer.
Right.
And in my book, A Protest History of the United States, I actually interviewed someone who was in the Student Nonviolent Coalition Committee, coordinating committee, and he was the one who bailed Fannie Lou Hamer out of jail in Mississippi when she had been beaten in jail that time. He was a student. He had gone to Morehouse. He had taken time off to work in SNCC, and he was the one who was responsible for bailing Fannie Lou Hamer out of jail in Mississippi after she had been held there and beaten there. And I think about the fact that many people have said that she had her life shortened because of that beating, that because of all the time she spent protesting in the rain and the heat, that her life was shortened. But in particular, because of that beating that she took, it was so horrendous, she was never the same. That she had a limp afterwards, and she was never the same because of that. So you can look at that and just look at how those people have been affected by, you know, and she of course was a voting rights, you know, icon. We should all know Fannie Lou Hamer in Sunflower County, Mississippi. We should understand that, you know, what she was able to do was so amazing, but we've got to keep lifting these names up. And what this does is also empower us, right? Because we need that recommitment, and we need to be empowered. We need to keep fighting forward, because the people who got us where we are today, we can't be freedom freeloaders and think we're just supposed to freeload off of what people did to get us here, and just like get everything we can and suck it up like gravy and not put anything back in for the future generations, because the generations that never knew our names got us where we are now. We've got to give for generations we'll never know. Are we selfless enough, as the ancestors were? They fought for people for the future, for things they would never see for themselves. And I wonder if we have that kind of integrity. I wonder if we have that kind of courage. Do we have that kind of selflessness, that kind of character, that we can actually invest in future generations we might not ever see, for things that they will have that we won't share? Or they say, can we plant the seeds for a tree, the shade for which we will not feel? Yeah. Can we do that? Are we able? Are we the generation to do that? Or are we a bunch of freedom freeloaders who want to keep, you know, just lapping it up from what's been given to us and not put anything back? And I mean, put it back in full measure, not tiptoeing around the edges, thinking, well, I'll put in a little bit and take out 20, you know, it's like I'll put in 1 and take out 20, you know. So,
and I love that quote.
I just want us to make sure that we know that.
Yeah, that's a great quote, freedom freeloaders. And there's a lot of people that are in that space and everything like that. And I have to get in touch, because that's the place that we were doing the tour yesterday was the Pauli Murray Center. And of course, people know the legacy of
Yes.
Pauli Murray and all along those lines, even though I don't know because she lived her full life and everything like that, that she would be considered a martyr. But she did have to do a lot of sacrifice in her own ways, even though she lived what many people would consider a full life and everything like that. But maybe even in what she had to, or do in terms of like being free to express who she really was and everything like that. That might be a form of martyrdom as well, because I know that some people say that she didn't really come out in that sense and everything till much later in history and everything like that. So definitely that might be a form of martyrdom if you believe in some of the stories about what her background was and all along those lines. So I guess martyrdom can also be when we are suppressing who we are and everything like that.
Well, I wrote a book, She Took Justice, The Black Woman, Law, and Power. And
Right.
Pauli Murray is definitely in that book, and the case that she worked on in Alabama, because in Alabama, there was a time period in which women could not serve on juries.
Right.
And so Pauli Murray was one of the attorneys who worked on the case that actually went to the appellate court. And she won that case. It did not go to the U.S. Supreme Court because they decided to settle at that point and allow women to be on juries. But Pauli Murray is definitely in my book. She Took Justice, The Black Woman, Law, and Power.
Yeah, that's another book that people need to get of yours as well. You mentioned earlier, and I just would love to hear your thoughts, not about this current holiday and everything, but you talked about class. And I don't know that we oftentimes talk enough about class in the sense of revolution and everything like that. Because one of the things that even on my history tours that I do at Hayti and everything is I talk about how some of the elite, the black elite and the white elite actually aligned with each other because of their class relationship, not necessarily their race relationship and everything along those lines. So I imagine that your book even touches on that, because it wasn't just here in North Carolina, even though Booker T. Washington did say that this was the same as he had seen of white people toward black people and everything like that. And part of that was because of the relationship. I mean, there's no doubt that Mr. Merrick, who was one of the founders of Black Wall Street, was Mr. Duke, the founder of Duke University's barber and everything like that. But also part of Black Wall Street is in downtown area, kind of like Pettigrew and Perry Street and everything like that. And it was in downtown even at that time, which meant that some of the white elite and the black elite were actually in closer proximity to each other than they might have been in other cities and everything like that, which might have led to some of that saner attitude, a different attitude than say Wilmington. Even don't get me wrong, there was definitely racism here as well, because Julian Carr was from here and he definitely did not have a great attitude toward African Americans. As a matter of fact, many people believe that he was a wizard in the Klan and everything like that. And even one of the times that he was giving a speech and everything like that, I think it was a dedication of something in Chapel Hill, he was bragging on the fact that he had just come back from beating his black woman slave and everything like that. So I just wanted your thoughts around class and its relationship even to our modern times. Because I think a lot of times we focus so much on the race relationships, but we don't focus enough on the class divide.
Well, we have class divides. And what we had, and I gave this example the other day when I spoke at one of the ACLU meetings, was that Thurgood Marshall couldn't go to the same places the elevator operator couldn't go to because he was black. You had people who were in the same pot. And so they had the same or very similar sense of urgency to want to change things. But once you started having people who were able to have a better life and leave the neighborhoods and have certain privileges, the sense of urgency began to wane. And I think that's where we are now. I think that this administration has shown people by laying off so many folks and taking away some of these high-powered positions that you may find yourself in position, economic position that you never felt you would be in your entire life. And that sense of urgency might be coming back. But I think there are those who, if they're in positions of some comfort, they say that the definition of conservative is having something to conserve. The idea that this sense of urgency to protest, to stand up, to do something is not felt by all on the same level. But it's always been a situation where not everyone wanted to do anything. People want to say, oh, everybody was always involved. No, it's always a percentage of people who are actually stood up to do anything in the first place. But that number with the resources, and those resources are very crucial. I have an acronym, STARC, STTARC, strategy, time, tenacity, alliances, resources, and creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Those resources were resources during the civil rights movement that came from a lot of people. Aretha Franklin was writing checks.
Right.
So these artists and other people, Harry Belafonte was writing checks.
Mhm.
He was doing fundraisers. What are our artists doing now as far as funding things? What are our athletes doing now as far as funding things for us to go forward? Where are we with the people who can write the checks in our relationship with them, that they are actually helping to have something happen as far as protest goes and a pushback against this administration's anti-DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion tactics? Because they are just a thinly veiled racism policy that we are living under, and yet I don't see any lawsuits being brought. I don't see people fighting it. I don't see, when I see the No Kings protests, I don't see anti-DEI protests. I have a protest sign that I carry that says that we will not be blamed or erased.
Right.
That's the sign I carry when I protest. So where are the anti-pro-Black signs that we should have out there if we're going to be protesting? So, and who's there for our resources to help us in this time period? Because protests cost money. In order to have the Montgomery bus boycott, we had to have people who helped those who didn't have as much.
Right.
You know, when they had the tent cities in Alabama, someone gave their land for people who were evicted to put up the tents. For the 1963 March on Washington, those buses cost money. I know for a fact that somebody who's rented buses to go to a protest, buses cost money. Buses don't go there for free.
Right.
That means that you have to get people to help you do these things. Where are the resources? That's the class issue. So there are people who might think, oh, I'm not the kind of person who wants to carry a sign on the street. Write a check. Write a check. Give your influence in other ways, but you can still participate. You don't have to be out there with a sign. Do like Aretha Franklin did and write a check.
No, and speaking of that, because I know that even during the incidences like with George Floyd and some of the other incidences that took place, there were a few athletes that did make statements and everything like that. I think LeBron James made a statement, and along those lines, I actually went to my university. Was a very good activist friend of mine. That's how I got there and everything like that, because Howard Fuller helped create the Malcolm X University here in Durham when we had that. And of course, he's been very much involved in charter schools and everything like that. But while I was there, Doc Rivers was one of our star athletes, because I was there in the 80s, and I have heard Doc Rivers, even though he's not the coach of the Bucks anymore, speak out on issues. So he has used his bully pulpit, whether that was as a sports commentator or as a coach, to come out and make statements and everything like that. So I was actually proud of him as a fellow alumni a couple of times when he did that and everything like that, because he's one of those few that would come out and make statements about some of the things that he went through in his own life, having grown up in suburban Chicago, I think Maywood area and everything like that, but also having recognized some of the places that other of his athletes went to that might have been considered quote unquote more ghetto. So he has stepped out and made a couple of comments, and sometimes that's got him in trouble, because sometimes if you step out and you make a voice, it can get you in trouble.
Oh my goodness, yes. It can get you in trouble. And what did they say? What did John Lewis say? Good trouble, necessary trouble.
Yeah.
Because you can't just want a softer pillow in the prison and better hours on the plantation. You've got to be able to see that the systems that are created, that are there for certain people, we have been able to navigate those systems up to a certain point. Then one day they woke up, studied that we had progressed as far as we had, and decided to block every ladder, burn the wood from the ladder and make sure that it was never there again. So we need to understand that being amiable was great when the job was there for us to just do, but being amiable is not going to create the ladder that we needed to climb to get to the job. They have burned down the ladder. So now we have to be a little less amiable and start making demands, because as Frederick Douglass said, that, power, you must have demand. It concedes nothing without demand, and it never has, and it never will. And that demand means that amiability, you can smile while you make the demand, but you still need to make the demand.
You gotta make the demand. That makes a lot of sense and everything like that. Because I mean, that was part of the conversation between Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois, and I kind of alluded to the Booker T. Washington quotes that said the Hate I Heritage Center, but there's also one that W.E.B. Du Bois had, which was this whole notion of us not being accommodationist or assimilationist and everything like that, because he was definitely proud of what we had in our own community and everything like that. Because one of the quotes that he has is the fact that you literally could be born at a hospital that was primarily run by African Americans, that in that case that being Lincoln Hospital, and that you could be buried when your life ended by a black funeral maker and everything, or black funeral home director and everything like that. But you could also have a lot of things that we were creating in our own community. Because I know he mentions the fact that you could get a suit that was built by a black tailor and everything like that. You could even get a mattress, because one of the things that I talked about is you didn't have to go to Sears and everything like that. You could actually get a mattress that was made in our own community by our own hands. And of course, there were famous black brick masons and even architects. Julian Abel is designed and a major architect of Duke University and everything like that. And Mr. Fitzgerald was a major brick taker and brick maker. And a lot of his bricks are here throughout Durham and the Carolinas and everything like that. So that's part of the quote that W.E.B. Du Bois had of how much was in our own community and everything like that. But you had others that were wanting for us to assimilate more. And I think that that's still a conversation that is going on now. How much are we going to be?
Yes. It's still a conversation that's going on now, but I want to go back to something. Remember I said my book, A Protest History of the United States, is a book on 500 years of protest history and protesters, but it's also a memoir. Right. And so I interweave storytelling into A Protest History of the United States, my book, my most recent book. I start my book off with Eliza, who was my great-great-grandmother, who was born enslaved in Kentucky. And she was part of that first wave of people from the South to the North, and they were called exodusters. And the exodusters came up from the South in the 1870s. So Eliza in 1879 went from Kentucky to Kansas after slavery ended. She went through a lot of hardships, but her two of her grandchildren, one, Maddie, graduated from college in 1907 and became a teacher. Her other child, William, graduated from law school and worked on some of the groundbreaking cases that then gave way to Brown versus Board of Education. He didn't live long enough to be a part of those cases that were the Brown cases, but he worked on, as a lawyer, some of the primary cases in Kansas. And those cases are in my book, Race, Law, and American Society, 1607 to present, in the education chapter. And so when you think about class, you think about the fact that you had people in all different places. I even have cousins in my family in the 1920s who graduated from Spelman. So they went from Kansas to Atlanta during a time period when the Klan was rampant throughout Atlanta. And you used to talk about W.E.B. Du Bois. Remember, he used to talk about the fact that they would cut off ears and leave them in the store windows, as souvenirs of the lynchings. And so when you start thinking about even like my family line, with people who went to college, the people who didn't go to college, the people who just worked regular jobs, the things they did, everybody did something that would give way for you and me to be here today.
Yeah, that makes
they had to say, yes, yeah, I have an education degree. Yeah, I have, but just like I said with Thurgood Marshall, he couldn't do anything more than the elevator operator could do who was black. Because they didn't care if he was a lawyer or not. He was not going to stay at the hotel. He was not going to eat at the restaurant. He had to make sure he got out of town before the Klan came. This class issue is making this divide where people are feeling, I don't have any pressure to do anything, so I'm just going to live my life. And this is what I hear from folks. Why can't I just live my life? Martin Luther King could have just lived his life. His father had a church, he had a job, he had a PhD, when a lot of black people didn't have PhDs. He could have just lived his life, but he chose to actually do something for the greater good. And that's what I hope we can break through with this class issue and not have people lose what they have in order to feel like they're part of the group, but be where they are with resources and feel like they can help us lift as we climb.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As you were saying that and talking about your own history, I was actually just thinking about my grandmother who lived until 1982 and passed away at 75. But she was actually the first person that actually, first African American librarian in Raleigh, North Carolina, and she actually founded the Richard B. Harrison Library, which was the public library and the first library in Raleigh to serve African Americans. So I imagine that she was probably getting some pushback from the government of that time and everything like that. I need to talk to my dad to
Yes.
find out what kind of pushback she was getting. But she went to Howard University and worked there as a student library assistant. But then in like I want to say the 30s, she actually went to Columbia and everything like that. So this was a light skinned African American woman, and I imagine there couldn't have been that many people of color that were there studying library science even in the 1930s and
Hmm.
everything like that. So that's part of her legacy and part of my family legacy and everything like that. Because she also worked at Shaw University, which we know is a major HBCU as well. But Richard B. Harrison actually still stands, and they actually just named some awards for her earlier last year. So they made those awards last year, and it's for people that are doing community service and doing a lot of work in that sense. So they're honoring people that were following in her tradition and everything like that. So it's good to
Yes,
hear.
and that is so wonderful. And those ancestors, we just go back and look at how we got here.
Right.
How many relatives had to do these things under circumstances much more difficult than we're facing right now. And if we can do that, that could give us the power, the empowerment, the spirit to say, I can do some more. What else can I do? And as I said, that's how Martyrs Day came to be. I asked myself what else I can do. What more can I do? And so that's why I founded Martyrs Day, July 5th of this year is the first inaugural Martyrs Day program at Riverside Church. Go to martyrsday.us, and it's on live stream, so you can watch it happen. We've got singers, we've got drummers, we've got people from all different walks of life talking about different martyrs and experts who are discussing martyrs. It's going to be an in-person program that's also live streamed from Riverside Church, famous church where Nelson Mandela spoke, where Martin Luther King spoke, where so many people spoke. This is a very old church, huge church in Manhattan.
I'm familiar with
So
Riverside,
I
just
hope
like
people will go to martyrsday.us.
yeah, I'm familiar with Riverside, just like I'm familiar with Abyssinian and a couple of other famous churches that
Yes,
are there.
I'm speaking at Abyssinian later this month. I'm going to be speaking at Abyssinian.
Because that's definitely one of those rich churches and everything like that. I know that they just recently honored the Muslim community here in Durham because they just put up a plaque for one of the first mosques that was here and everything like that. And I know Riverside is definitely a Christian church, but how can the other communities, whether it's the Muslim community or the Hindu community or other communities, honor their martyrs that are of their faith as well and everything like that? Because I know many people will think, of course, of Malcolm X, but there were a number of other martyrs that existed in the different other faiths as well. So what are some of the ways that you're reaching out to some of the other communities and other faith communities that aren't necessarily just the Christian community that they can celebrate this holiday as well?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Malcolm X because he is in the group of martyrs that we have on our website on martyrsday.us. But we sent letters out. We decided we're gonna send letters out to the synagogues. We're gonna send letters out to the temples. We've sent letters out probably to about 200 different religious entities across the tri-state area to let them know that Martyrs Day existed, to have them, like invite them to Riverside, invite them to see our program live streamed. I mean, we're also so excited that people wherever they are can think about whether or not you've been here. My family dates back, probably yours too, to the late 1700s. As I said, great great grandmother Eliza was born in 1820s. So when we start thinking about all that led up to this time period, we have a wealth of history just between our two bloodlines.
Right.
Whether or not you've been here 5 years or 15 years or 50 years, this is history. This is the American history, unfortunately, that many people in this administration don't want you to know.
Right.
There is history all around us. So people who attend, whether or not they attend in person or live stream, let's share our history because we're all in this together and we need to share our history because divide and conquer is real and it works. And the only thing that defeats divide and conquer is what? Unity.
Right.
Unity. Unity is the only thing that defeats divide and conquer. It has in the past, it will in the future, but we've got to be unified in order to use it. And that means we have to come together and not see each other as so much competition that we can't work together, because there's too much this competitiveness between male, female, between different groups, and suspicions about this, that, and the other. We're just going to get picked off one by one unless we learn how to be more unified and work together.
No, that makes a lot of sense and everything. And you mentioned that this is going to have a lot of rich history and everything like that, and a lot of good performances. You mentioned spoken word, and actually, right now, our slam team is actually in Orlando because they're competing at Southern Fried and everything like that. And I do know that a lot of our poets talk about social justice in their poems, whether that's around women's rights or whether that's around different things that they have gone through. Because a lot of spoken word is about the personal history and everything like that, but it's also very much about social justice, and social justice can be around women's rights, gender rights, and a number of race rights, and all along those lines and everything. But it sounds like you're going to have a very rich program, because you even mentioned Drummond and Baba Chuck Davis, who is originally from Raleigh but spent a lot of time in New York until he passed about 8 or 9 years ago and everything like that. He was very much involved in bringing African drumming to this community and everything like that. So it sounds like it's going to be a very rich history of entertainment, but entertainment with purpose. So I just wanted your thoughts around the way that entertainment has influenced us, even in the way that we do our protests and everything, because you did mention your book and everything like that. And I know Leontine Price was very much involved in the civil rights struggle, and others have been involved in the civil rights struggle, including Harry Belafonte. And people forget that Sam Cooke actually wrote A Change Is Going to Come when he ran across some students here at North Carolina Central University that were part of one of the original sit-ins and everything like that. That's actually where he got his inspiration for that particular song, because they were telling him what they were doing in their protest in probably the 50s or the 60s, and that's when he wrote the song A Change Is Going to Come and everything like that. So how is your thoughts, just as one that has written a book about protest, has entertainment been to the protest mindset?
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because in my book, A Protest History of the United States, I put in the fact that art is a part of protest and has been a part of protest, whether or not that art is dance or music. Nina Simone is, with all the amazing songs, those were protest songs, whether or not it's about Mississippi or, all of these different songs that she's written and sung. We also, of course, have, the paintings that we could have. Sculpture can be part of protest, poetry part of protest. Strange Fruit is a protest song against lynching. So that's also in my Protest History of the United States book. I look at different ways in which song, music, and different art forms have been used in protest. It's so important when you think of the Alvin Ailey dancers and what they did and how they used the fact that you exist and go forward with your dreams is a protest against people who would crush your dreams. For those who say you cannot, no matter what your age is, if that dream is still on your heart, don't let it die there. Push forward. That push forward is protest against people who will put you in a box and say, no, you can't. That's what protest is all about. We see it more when it comes to the labor movements, and labor is a chapter in my book. The climate change is a chapter in my book. The women's movement is a chapter in my book. And people understand it when it's anti-war and it's a war and people are protesting the war, protesting against this administration. But the personal protest is where we gain the empowerment to do the larger ones. If we can see what it is I have inside of me, that voice is saying can still be heard if I let it out, and you let it out in different ways and make yourself be the person while you still have breath in your body that you can be, is a protest against being limited. And that's what people of color did. That's what women did. That's what immigrants did. We had to say to ourselves, this whole country tells me I'm nothing. I inside know I am something important, and I am going to invest in that importance. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to earn my living. I'm going to be the person I want to be. That is a protest against everything saying that you cannot do it. So when we talk about Pauli Murray, we talk about anybody, you have all of these forces that are always trying to crush. And the more you're a vulnerable person, a person of color, a woman, whatever it may be, a person with disabilities, it's easier for the forces to try to undermine you, because people are going to give you less credence. I've been underestimated so many times, it's unbelievable. And I say to myself, I'm not going to listen to what this person is saying. I know the path God has for me, and I'm going to pray on the power to do what I need to do and follow my spiritual path. My spiritual path said start Martyrs Day.
No, speaking of
And that's
starting
what I
Martyrs
did.
Day, and speaking of starting Martyrs Day and everything, because you were saying that, I was just thinking about something else as well, Gloria and everything like that. But one of the things I was wondering about is martyrs aren't just the physical martyrs, because one of the things that even we talk about, and is actually on one of the murals that's upstairs at the Hayti Heritage Center, and all along those lines, is that there are um, physical martyrs, like the martyr that we are thinking about, which is the physical body and everything like that. But there's also the martyr of institutions and everything like that. So I was wondering if Martyr Day will touch on that, because one of the things that we talk about at the Hayti Heritage Center is the fact that when the highway came through and destroyed that rich neighborhood of Black Wall Street and everything like that, that it cost $350 million in today's dollars. I believe that's the figure that is on that particular mural. But I actually think it's probably higher, because we know that inflation has happened. So probably close to 400 to 450 million, and so close to 350 to 400 businesses or something along those lines. But it was multiple hundreds of businesses that were sacrificed as well. So will Martyrs Day also reflect on some of the physical structures that were martyred as well and everything, or you only deal with the physical human beings and everything? Because I do know that sometimes even in our own history talk, we talk about the loss, and you mentioned Wilmington earlier, and it was the physical destruction of lives lost, but there's also destruction with the fire of buildings and institutions and everything like that in Wilmington, and the same can be said in Tulsa with the bombing and everything like that. So will Martyrs Day also acknowledge some of the damage that was done to our institutions as well?
Well, at this point, and I know we're running short on time, but at this point, I really want to focus on the people.
Right.
And that's because the people aren't even known. We can't get to the people so that we can even get to the structures.
Right.
Because people don't know what happened in history that would cause that structure for these people to want to burn it in the first place, and not care how many people's lives might get lost in the fire. Because I know there are many lives lost in Tulsa during that time period, during the bombing of the Tulsa neighborhood in Greenwood. So I really want to talk about these mass events.
Right.
So we do have on our calendar that we're going to talk about mass events like the South Carolina Charleston church shootings, like Greenwood, like Rosewood, and many others. There, like I said, we thought at the beginning there would be probably hundreds into 1,000, but now we're looking at thousands of martyrs. It's like I really want to write about this as well, because I am a writer. As I told you, I began my life as a playwright. I always see myself as a playwright, and any bio I give, I add playwright to it, because that's part of who I am. I'm a creative, as well as somebody they claim as a public intellectual, but I'm a private person doing public work. That's how I look at it. I'm a private person doing public work. And I really want to get to the end of my journey and have God say, well done. That's my goal. And so Martyrs Day is something that I believe was put on my heart to do. And I decided that this is something that I should do. And martyrsday.us, MARTYRS, Martyrs Day, MARTYRS Day, martyrsday.us, because it's the first Martyrs Day in the United States. And if we have Memorial Day and we have Veterans Day, those people signed up for war.
Right.
These are regular people who go to the store to get bread and milk, and regular people like us who decided to stand up. Some people just want to, as you saw, as I told you about in 1874, and more recently just went to go vote. 1966 was when Vernon Dahmer was burned alive in his own home, right. Because he was, wanting to vote and want other Black people to vote in Mississippi. These are regular people. They didn't sign up for war. They signed up to have constitutional rights, and this is what happened to them.
Yeah, because I was even thinking you were saying that about some of the people that were killed by COINTELPRO acts and stuff like that. We know that a lot of the Black Panthers were martyred and everything like that. Fred Hampton, I think, was killed in his home and everything like that.
And
So I'm thinking,
Fred Hampton is on our website as one of this group of national martyrs. Fred Hampton is listed there. Yes, yes, he is on the website martyrsday.us.
so definitely there's a lot of martyrs that people, like you said, some people don't even know the history of Fred Hampton and some of the other members of the Panthers and all along those lines. As we get ready to wind down, there's a couple of things that I ask everybody, and definitely one of them is how you can be reached and everything like that. But then there's a couple of questions that I ask just to break the monotony of this very powerful interview that we've had and everything like that. But the first one that I'm going to ask you just really quickly, and you kind of alluded to it, is hopefully none of us are in a rush to have that end date and everything like that, but we are all the birth date to the end date, and that's the dash in between that is very important, which is what we do in our life and everything like that. So what would you hope to be said, and maybe you've already made these arrangements with your significant others on your tombstone that might be a quote, because I know some of the famous people have had quotes and everything like that. So what is something that you're hoping people will remember you by and everything like that?
I really would say that I tried my best, and I want you to try your best too. That's what I would put on there
I like
at
that.
this point.
I like that. That's a good one. You tried your best, and you want the other people to say that they tried their best as well. That's a very powerful one, and everything like that. And just really quickly, and this is kind of totally getting out of our conversation point and everything like that. What is something about Gloria Brown Marshall that people would be surprised to know? They know that you're a playwright. They know that you're very much into history, like I am, and everything like that. But what is a hobby or an interest of yours that people might be surprised by? For all I know, you might try to go skydiving. I'm not trying to fall out of anybody's plane. That's just me. I'm not trying to fall out of anybody's play, but we all have interesting hobbies. I like to do word games sometimes. I sometimes will even play the Jeopardy and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire on the phone and stuff along those lines. And definitely I come from a family of gamers, so when we get together, we oftentimes are playing spinners, which is kind of like dominoes and stuff like that. But what is something that people might be surprised to know is an interest of yours that they might not know if they're watching this interview, or maybe even your own family members may not know?
All right. Okay. I'm going to tell you a secret
Okay.
that I have not told anybody in public. And that is that one day I want to have like sing at a nightclub.
Okay.
That I want to sing like jazz standards at a nightclub. That's one thing I would like to do at some point. And that would be I would just like to test how that would go. So that would be something that I've not told anybody publicly at all. Haven't been rehearsing for it at all, but I've always been one of these people that sang at home and not to anybody's great delight except myself, and I'm not always pleasing myself. But it's like something that if I had a chance to do, I would probably like slip out, use a different name, and sing at a nightclub for like a month, and then slip
Well,
back home.
we have a great nightclub here that my friend Brett Chambers has got one of the longest running open mics at. As a matter of fact, it'll be taking place later on this evening. It's been a minute since I've gone, so I doubt I'll go this evening, but I do need to get there very soon because I think it's been going on for about 30 years or something along those lines. It's not always
Wow.
the same club because it started at a club called Talk of the Town. I think that was the first location, but he's also at Yancey's, and now he's at the Blue Note Grill where he's been for a number of years. So he's been at about 5 or 6 different venues, but it has been going on, and some major acts that have gone on to fame and fortune have actually appeared
Wow.
there, whether they were at North Carolina Central University already studying music or whether they were developing it as a hobby or whatever. But yeah, he's been doing that for a while. So if you ever come to Durham, you might have to come on a Wednesday and go to that open mic and test your singing abilities and everything like that. Because he's got a young lady that is his significant other now, and I think she's actually going to be performing, I want to say at Buddy Guy's in the near future, because I know she's already been to Buddy Guy in Chicago, and I think she's going to be doing some other engagements and everything like that. So, and she's worked at some of our local festivals and everything along those lines. So there's possibility if you come visit North Carolina, there are venues that are open to people coming in that are not necessarily professional singers and everything like that. So there might be an opportunity for you to do that and everything. And
Now remember, I said later in life.
I got you. Well, he's been doing it for 30 years, so it could still be going on another 20 or 30
I'm
years.
a pencil that in for later in life.
All right. You can pencil that in for this is 2026. You can pencil that in for 2036. So
Okay,
you
that
pencil that in
sounds
for
good.
2036. So later in life, that would be 2036 because I've got some things that I would like to do, including doing more travel because I've not done nearly enough travel. I've traveled a little bit in the United States, but I've only been out of country twice. Once when I was a youngster and was born here in Durham, but then dad was in the Air Force, and mom took me as I think 3 or 4 months old. So from about 4 months old to about 2.5, I was living in Turkey, and then a friend of mine went on a cruise right before the pandemic. So I went to Grand Turks, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. Which I know two of those are technically U.S. territories, U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. But Grand Turks, I think, is a separate country and everything like that. But those are the only two times that I've been out of the country. So I know that for me, one of my wishes, and I'll turn 64 in 3 weeks, is to actually do more travel. But that means getting a passport. That also means getting money because travel is not cheap and everything like that. So that might be like you. It might be 10 years from now before I'm actually able to accomplish it and everything like that. So it might be when I'm 74, 75. But I mean, dad is getting ready to celebrate his birthday in 10 days. No, he has 10 days, and he'll be turning 86, and mom will be just turned 84. So hopefully it'll be before I get to that age range, maybe in my late 60s or early 70s. But like you, I've got to get some other things accomplished and done in the more traditional sense of some of the work that I'm doing, whether that's in the grading company that I work for, the Cultural Arts Center that I've alluded to, and of course this network, Pod TV, and everything like that. If you would tell folks just really quickly again, and I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I thought that I brought some good questions to you and everything like that, and I'm glad that Lisa introduced us and all along those lines. But if you can tell folks how they can get in touch with you. You've done that several times in the show, but if you can tell them again, and the thing that I get all my guests to do, whether it's a group of guests, because sometimes it's a group of multiples and sometimes it's a one-on-one like this is, and everything like that, I get all my guests to actually share their message of positivity, because you mentioned like your own ministry with the Smarter Day. My mission is to do what I can to bring a positive world into creation, and sometimes it's the simple steps, like just us spreading positive messages. So I get all my guests to give a message of positivity. So if you can share what your message of positivity would be, and also how you can be reached and how folks can get in touch with you.
Well, I can be reached at info@martyrsday.us. Info, INFO, at martyrsday, MARTYRS day.us. MARTYRS day, DAY.US, martyrsday.us. I can be reached there. And my positivity would be, our ancestors are watching. Let's make them proud.
I like that. That's a very positive message and everything like that, because they are definitely watching and they are keeping track of what we are saying and what we are doing. So we do need to find ways to make them proud and everything along those lines. As we get ready to get out of here, the other thing is, I know you're an educator. You're a college educator, as well as other types of education. And of course, you are an activist, because you mentioned that you organize protests and everything along those lines. But a friend of mine from Oklahoma has started an award ceremony for the people that are not just the teachers, but also the support staff. And I think this has been going on for about 7 or 8 years. We can find out when the commercial plays, in about a 55-second commercial that I'll use to get us out of here. But just really quickly, to share with your thoughts about the importance of education, the importance of educators, but also the importance of those behind the scenes and everything like that. Because my mom was a guidance counselor. My grandmother, not the grandmother there was the librarian, but the other grandmother, which is mom's mom, was a cafeteria worker. So I think that sometimes we forget the people that are behind the scenes that are also important, whether that's the guidance counselor, the cafeteria workers, the janitor, or even in some cases the secretary, because a lot of times those are the people that actually know the secrets to what's going on in our school system and everything like that. So if you can just share with us, and then I'll play the commercial and get us all out of here, the importance of education to you, both as an educator and maybe some of the important educators that you remember, and maybe even some of the important behind the scenes people.
Well, in my book, A Protest History of the United States, I talk about libraries and how libraries that would be a place where the air conditioning was in the summertime. That's a place where I would love to get the stars for reading the books, each week, when they had the competitions for the most books being read. I love the libraries for the exploration, the librarians who are so helpful. I didn't realize that libraries were segregated until later on when I went down to the main library, and it was such a big deal for me to be this little Black child in the main library. But I really respect librarians and what they bring. I think about my music teachers, Mrs. Baskins. I think about my theater teachers, Miss Wilson and Miss Scott. Miss, I think about Dr. Foster, who was our choir teacher. I think about these teachers and all that they had to go through to put up with us rambunctious kids. And it's just ridiculous what we put them through when I look back on it. But they also saw something in me, Miss Wilson did as a public speaker. She saw something in me that I don't even know where she saw it. I don't know how she saw it, but she saw this in me in ninth grade. I remember Mrs. Sullivan when I was like in the fourth grade, because I'm a tall person. And I remember I've been tall for my whole life. I was either the first or the second tallest person in the class, girl or boy. And one day, Mrs. Allison said to me, and she was a short little white lady, and she said to me, you know, people are going to see you no matter if you stand up or not. So crunching your shoulders down and all that, that's not going to do anything. Stand tall. And if you're going to be seen, let them see you, because they're going to see you anyway. Let them see you at your best. So she was the one. She said, if I had your height, I would be standing up and I would be doing all these things. So these teachers not only taught me the subject matters, but they did things for me that to this day, as a grown person, I am so grateful for the words that they gave me of encouragement. You know, the ones that said awful things, I remember those too, and y'all shouldn't have done that. But the ones that said positive things, as an educator, I think about, wow, our words are so heavy sometimes. Sometimes I forget when things come out of my mouth how important they are to the young person hearing it, that I have to stop myself and go, okay, slow down, make sure you're saying what you need to say. Because as an educator, we forget we're just people, but we're saying things to people that will stay with them, just like what's been said to me stayed with me all these years. So I want to say thank you for those people who were teaching me, those people who were believing in me before anything happened. They saw something in me. I ran track for a while, and I did debate and forensics, you know, and public speaking. That's like, wow, how do these people know? I was a class officer walking down the hall, and the school secretary said, you know, they were having a discussion about people they wanted to run for student council. Why don't you run for student council? I was just walking down the hall, and someone, you know, and the school secretary said this to me. So people can influence you, whether or not they're in front of the classroom, whether or not they're helping the classroom get cleaned up, whether or not, as what happened in one of my classrooms, there's security, you have to come and get somebody, you know. So you have people who are part of what makes an education system work.
No, I agree with you.
And yes, I think that's what's so important. I just want to say thank you to all those people who have been helpful. Many of them probably have passed on, but I want to say to their spirit, thank you. And if I didn't thank you before, I thank you now for having poured into me in ways that have helped me to develop and grow and become a better person.
No, I appreciate that, and I agree with you about the importance of these people, whether it's the security or the janitor or a number of others as well. And sometimes words are important, because my brother works with at-risk youth, and he's been doing that for a number of years. It took him a while to figure out what he wanted to be when he grows up, and he's in his about to be heading toward late 50s and everything like that, because he's 7 years younger than I am. So he'll be 57 this coming October and everything like that. But he's definitely done a lot of work with at-risk youth, and I hate even using that term, because sometimes it creates this notion of us putting a prediction on them before it even happens and everything like that. So sometimes I try to not use that word, even though it does slip out sometimes, because sometimes we make a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's the word I was looking for, and everything like that, when we give them those labels and everything like that. But you've been a great guest, and I definitely appreciate you. And I'm going to play this commercial about education and this award that comes out of Oklahoma and get us on out of here. But I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm glad that I found you through Lisa and everything like that. And I look forward to Martyrs Day, and I'll have to find a way to get you to come to HATAC, because I know we're planning events for the
Yes.
next season, because this season the season that was from 2025 to 2026 with the celebration of our 50th year, because we started in 1975 there at the Hayti Heritage Center. But I know that Monet and others are already putting together the plans for year 51 as well as other years, including 52 and beyond, because we've been here for 50 years at the Hayti Heritage Center, and we're hoping to be here for another 50 years. I don't know that I'll be here that long. That would make me 114, but one never knows. Maybe I'll be in the Century Club and everything like that. So I used to joke that I would love to be living to 200 and everything like that, but then you have to wonder, if all your friends are gone and your family members are gone, how much of a life is it and everything like that. But only the man above knows the destiny and all along those lines. So on that note, I'm going to get out here with these commercials, but I thoroughly appreciate you being my guest on this particular day and this particular edition of the Online Dinner Party.
Thank you, sir.
No problem.
I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop. I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop.
I want to thank everyone for coming to the 2020 TAF Awards. This was a show like no other, people. This is the Grammys for dignitaries, educators, and support staff around the state of Oklahoma and worldwide. We cannot do this without the support of the people. So we thank you, I thank you, for being such a dedicated supporter to this movement for the Teachers Appreciation Foundation. I thank you.
I won't fold.